Thank you so much for tuning into my show, William Wallis for America. I appreciate your time, and I know I like to tell you that I'm grateful for that time, but I really think it's very important that everybody starts getting more involved, not only in local elections and politics, the nationwide, I don't want to say hysteria, the narratives nationwide, and all the different things going nationwide tends to distract us. And we forget about our local elections. We forget about how important our locals are, because those are the people that are on the ground, because the best way to fix our country is to start in our own communities, in our own cities. Then we fix our states, and then we really truly have the best way to fix our country. And when we do that, we watch what's going on with other elections in other cities and states. We learn things about candidates that maybe we could bring into our own communities, which is why I always say I'm grateful that you're watching this from anywhere in the United States, because I believe local candidates like the one you're going to meet tonight are going to be the most important people for your community. I want to thank my sponsors. If you come to New Orleans, you can go visit Quarter View. They're a great little local restaurant, Signet Landing. They also do alligator tours, Shortstop Po' Boys if you need just a nice little po' boy. And Door Furniture, if you're looking to have some good quality furniture in a family-run business. With me in this interview is a New Orleans mayoral candidate, Frank Janusa. Frank, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, William. I'm delighted to be here on your show. I'm attempting to show the voters of Orleans Parish, the city of New Orleans, that they have a new candidate who brings bold, informative, and interesting ideas to save this city. And I think that a city like New Orleans, which is 307 years old, needs to have vibrant leadership. We've elected the wrong people for the last 50 or 60 years. Even our current city council voted for a 2026 budget deficit of over $100 million. This is indefensible. And two of the candidates for mayor are two of the 7 who voted for that same deficit spending. You cannot operate a city of this magnitude, of this land area, this mass of people, with a $1.8 billion budget and yet run a $100 million deficit. Because all that does over time is cause additional debt and additional interest expenses. And it's simply got to stop. And my platform is to primarily balance the budget. The city has innumerable problems. It's got problems with the streets, with the sewage and water board, with infrastructure, with education. But all of that stems from bad finances. The city is stuck on stupid when it comes to generating funds and spending funds. Things that I've uncovered in the current budget and in the city's financial statements, the last of which that were issued were the ones for 2023, and they were issued in the summer of 2024. It's an absolute abomination.
What's going to be really interesting as you talk about finances here is that there's going to be some secrets in this interview that the listeners today of this audio, this podcast, are going to be able to really learn a lot that you've never heard of about before. And I've talked to some people about the different funds that we're going to talk about, different financing stuff. So you're going to learn some things that you never knew about New Orleans, which maybe today's interview will do that, where this is going to be not only, an interview as a mayoral candidate, but also you've got some good information that when you find out this stuff, you might go, aha, maybe that's why all the elected officials in the past don't talk about these things. Maybe these people that have been in office before, which is why we need somebody different, like you're saying.
Exactly.
The people that aren't talking about it are the ones hiding it. And when you hear about the different funds and the different places where financing is coming from, you might find out why they're running deficit spending. You might find out why good people like you, Frank Janusa, are going to try to do some things differently, why we need to elect different leadership. And while this might sound like I'm really promoting somebody, I'm promoting good ideas
Absolutely.
that you're coming out here with. Listen first to you. Let's hear your resume, Frank. Let's hear
Certainly.
really some things that you not only believe in. And I'm going to let you go a little bit. I'm going to interrupt you every so often,
Sure.
though. But let's hear a little about you and what makes you qualified to run for mayor.
Primarily, I am a native son of this city. I'm the third generation of Sicilian immigrants that came in the 1890s. My grandfather and his several siblings. Those were the people who actually laid the sewer pipe, laid the water pipe, dug the ditches, and laid the rails and drove the streetcars and created the economy of the 1910s, 20s, and 30s. They were people who faced both ethnic, racial, and class discrimination. And they found the wherewithal among themselves to actually self-finance homes for people of young legal immigrants who came to the United States. Young people who wanted to get married, wanted to buy a house, didn't want to live in their in-laws' house. And my grandfather was the progenitor, if you will, of something called the Christopher Columbus Society, which was in effect a localized ethnic bank among the Sicilian and Italian immigrants. And over time, they would collect nickels and dimes and quarters from their various members of their workforce, put it in a collective pot, if you will. And in the span of 6 months, they actually financed one of the first houses for one of the young men who had just got married. And in the 1910s and 1920s, the ability to buy a house was limited. Banks did not loan to Italian immigrants. So they had to create their own bank, in effect. That was the brainchild of my grandfather, who had a very interesting and facile mathematical mind. And I think that has devolved to me because I am a licensed CPA in the state of Louisiana. I've been licensed since the age of 21.
Oh, wow.
For 52 years. And my primary focus is taxations, oil and gas, and successions, and business development and business enterprises. And I will develop that more when I discuss with you some of the interesting things that I found out about the city of New Orleans and its finances. But my family goes back to the 1890s. They developed this town, and we've seen the decline in the city over the last 40, 50 years. Used to be the Queen City of the South. It was the second largest port in the United States, and now it's like number 6. Tonnage is down, ships are down, employment is down, education is terrible. My grandparents and his siblings built this city, and it's my turn to rebuild it from scratch, from the nonsense that's taking place at 1300 Perdido Street at City Hall. It's got to be done. We've got to save the city, not only for my children and grandchildren, all of whom live in the city of New Orleans, but for their friends, their families, their extended family, for everyone who lives in the city. Black, white, yellow, brown, or gray, doesn't matter. We've got to save this city. This city has an environment of natural resources that other cities would die for. Few cities have the Mississippi River except those that lie on the Mississippi. You know, you don't get the excitement of New Orleans in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It just doesn't happen. You don't get that excitement in Des Moines, Iowa. You know anybody going to Des Moines, Iowa?
So basically what I'm hearing from you so far is when you say from scratch, you don't necessarily mean just like we do in the whole city. You mean taking the good parts about the city, or do you mean this, the good parts of the city and doing a fresh rehab on it, if you will? I got a few other questions based on some things you've just now said. So let's.
Yes, we've got to rehab what is rehabable. And what does work, we've got to make it work better. What doesn't work, we've got to make it work, period. We've got to get back to reinstating basic services for the population of New Orleans. They're the people who are paying the freight, primarily. And we've got to give them what they're paying for.
I like what you said a minute ago when you said you want to represent the people of New Orleans, whether they're black, white, yellow, or any color. And it made me think of something. When you go to a festival and you go to New Orleans and you go downtown and you shop, I mean, black people, white people, I mean, people of all cultures, and we talk and we're friendly. New Orleans is like this huge melting pot.
It is.
It really is kind of an example of what we say America is, a melting pot. But in New Orleans, you might go down the street and you see somebody who looks totally different from you. And the next thing you know, you're having dinner at their house. Maybe you're at a crawfish boil, you're together. And there's this sense of unity in our city. Today is the anniversary of Katrina. Not that I wanted to bring that up because I think the narratives are being used to kind of separate us at times. But today's the anniversary of Katrina.
Yes, it is.
Yet, and Katrina brought so many people together. However, our city elected officials, our city government, the way government operates does not seem to reflect that togetherness.
No.
City government seems to be kind of like a little fiefdom. You get the sewage and water board. You've got all these different, and again, I'm going to refer to the funds that we're going to talk about in a minute, and some of the city secrets that we're going to talk about in a minute here. We don't feel that in New Orleans government. When it comes to when you hear New Orleans government, it's almost like every man for himself and not reflective of that togetherness. We have so many different festivals and things here, and everybody's out having a good time. Is that the sense of what you're talking about that you want to bring to government?
Exactly. As individual citizens, we have to learn, first of all, to get along well. We have to engage in collaboration of good ideas, not the chaos of government. The office of the mayor and the city council are constantly at odds. The office of the mayor is the executive branch of city government. The city council is the legislative branch. And of course, the third branch are the courts. The mayor's office operates as a systemic silo. The city council operates as a systemic silo. The twain never meet. You've got to have collaboration. You've got to have cohesiveness. You've got to have action that's beneficial to everybody in the city when those two parties get together. They cannot be constantly at war, which they have been for the last 8 years.
So I'm hearing that not only are you talking about our government is not reflective of the people and the togetherness that the people feel, but our government elected officials here in New Orleans are not together themselves.
Exactly.
So a question came to mind. I like to preempt this here as you're talking, because you're bringing up some really good ideas and you're bringing up some really good things. I think I want to kind of highlight and double underline here. Our government, or the government in New Orleans, is often been run, I don't want to say it's a popularity contest, but it becomes something that is reflective of past administrations, maybe ethnicity, whatever the case may be. It could be like Mitch Landrieu was a different ethnicity, but he was kind of already in that power structure.
Yes.
You've got some bridges to cross. You've got you've got a lot of ground to cover, if you will. How are you going to work with everybody to bring them that representative government that maybe they feel they have to vote a certain way?
Yes.
To get, and you've got to, like I said, you got a lot of bridges to build for people that normally feel like they have to vote a certain way to get what they want that they might not get from you. Let's talk about what you're going to do to make those people realize that you're going to help bring them to the table in rehabbing New Orleans and starting something new that could mean more for them.
Absolutely.
Is this where you're going?
Absolutely. When you look at the city government, you have a constant power play between the mayor's office and the city council. And within the city council, there's always bickering. On occasion, one can speculate that they're more interested in retaining power, building power, rather than serving the needs of the citizens who fund the government. My position is that since I have no political dynasty behind my name, I'm not related to any of the prior mayors of the city, that the ability to have fresh leadership is just going to be refreshing to people. If people would understand what's in my heart, to understand that to make this city grow, you've got to get rid of this power play nonsense. You've got to exercise what I call servant leadership. And this reminds me of St. Louis, King of France, Louis IX. He was a servant king. He ruled France for many years. He didn't rule it with an iron fist. He ruled it by bringing the homeless into his castle, by feeding those who were underserved in the food world, by housing people, by clothing the naked. He visited the jails. He is the individual for whom St. Louis Cathedral was named. Servant leadership. As a matter of fact, the Archdiocese of New Orleans awarded my wife and I the Order of St. Louis IX Medallion for decades of service to the city and to the church. He is a model for me. He's as much a model to me as my grandfather, who created the Christopher Columbus Society. Those are the types of ideals that I aspire to. I've got no desire for power. I don't need this job, but I want this job because I think I've got the skill set that can move this city forward and make it again the Queen City of the South. It's got to be done for our kids, grandkids, and everyone who follows us, and everyone who is even involved collaterally. And what benefits the city of New Orleans benefits the entire metro region.
So before we get into the hidden funds and the hidden money and where the money's been getting hidden that a lot of people in New Orleans don't know about, I think that when the people of New Orleans find out about some of this hidden stuff, they're going to realize that the people that they've been voting for in the past have been put in office, have not benefited them or the city like they could have with some of the funds that are out there, or bringing government together. So before we get into that, I want to ask you a bunch of questions, and maybe we can just do some short answers,
Sure.
To kind of really help people realize where what you're going to do, as mayor, what you're going to do to not only bring that cohesiveness back together or bring the city back together with cohesiveness, but let's talk about the sheriff's office. How will you work with the sheriff's office and even the police superintendent, because right now everybody's pointing at, the current sheriff
Yes.
for what she did wrong, but there's nothing, nobody's trying to fix it, it seems. How will you work with the sheriff's office and the superintendent to bring that cohesiveness together and fix those problems?
That's a very good question. What's interesting about Orleans Parish, City of New Orleans, is that it has both a police force and a sheriff's office. And it doesn't seem to be working quite well. We had the terrorist debacle of January 1st, of beginning of this year, which was basically messed up by the police department to some degree, and a lot of that seems to be hidden away. The sheriff's department has had this massive breakout a month and a half ago, where 10 people just walked out of parish prison, or the Orleans Justice Center, as they've renamed it. Police department and the sheriff's department is not working. The sheriff's department is on its totally separate accounting system for how it operates and generates funds. That needs to go onto the city's accounting system. It's called BRASS.
Is this being done in other cities?
Yes. For instance, Jefferson Parish has a unified justice system as it relates to crime. It has a single sheriff. The sheriff's deputies do the same work that NOPD does. They patrol the streets, they arrest criminals, But in Jefferson Parish, which seems to be a paragon of justice, they've got the sheriff's department working efficiently and very well. And it's all under one umbrella. It's not two separate. You got in Orleans Parish, you have the superintendent, you got the sheriff.
So when you have that cohesiveness in city government and everybody's kind of working under the same umbrella,
yes,
there's like natural oversight.
Not only that, but it saves millions of dollars.
So let's talk about how you're going to work with the council to be able to bring cohesiveness to the council, so there's not this constant power play that you're referring to.
Well, fortunately, as you know, there are 5 district councilmen and 2 councilmen at large. Of all of the races, there's only one sitting council person who is unopposed, and she will stay. But there will be 6 new council people, 4 new district councilmen and 2 new councilmen at large. It will be a fresh group of people who I will work with one-on-one, and I will be able to discuss the issues that affect their particular district, but at the same time give them an overarching view of what the mayor's office wants to do for the city and how it's going to affect their district. What I perceive is that government should, first of all, be limited government. And second, to the extent that limited government exists, it should be from the ground up. It should swell up from the population, not top down. Top down leadership is not leadership at all. But bottoms up leadership is servant leadership, much like King Louis IX.
What I see in New Orleans is the electorate gets catered to in ways that they feel like they have to vote for a certain person to be able to get the power that you're referring to, that you want to do from the top, but with the ability to be able to help people bring them to the top. I'm kind of hearing that right?
You've got it pretty much on target.
And the other question that comes to my mind is, when you you don't come from a law enforcement background.
No.
You come from an accounting background, which is excellent. We need an accountant.
But my father was a Louisiana state trooper in the 1920s, and he was a bodyguard to Huey Long in the late 1920s.
Good piece of information.
And my mother's father was a St. Charles Parish deputy, wore his sheriff's hat, and rode a horse out of Hawnville and Ama, Louisiana.
Good little side story there.
That's the closest I am to law enforcement.
So without law enforcement experience, which no mayor's ever really had, and that's not where I'm going with this. Where I'm going with this is, most of the mayors that I've seen in the past in New Orleans, they treat that mayor's office as their fiefdom.
Yes.
They have control of the sewage and water board.
Yes.
They have control over these funds we're going to bring up in a minute. I keep teasing people about, I know, but we're getting to that. And then they kind of isolate themselves, as you kind of referred to a minute ago.
Silo approach.
I like that. So you're going to, so as mayor, you don't necessarily have to, but I've heard the answer is yes. But again, because sometimes you ask a question a second time, you get a different answer. Again, you're telling me you're going to be hands-on with the sheriffs, the superintendent, and the city council in a way that's more collaborative than the silo approach.
Absolutely. Because in order to generate meaningful change, you can't have power plays inside of separate silos. You've got to work together. Together, you achieve more. That's why the word team doesn't have the letter I in it. It's not an ego focus. Team, together, everyone achieves more. You've got to have a team approach. And that's what's been lacking in city government for decades. Everybody is interested in their own fiefdom, their own piece of the action, and their own desire for power. And we all know the old adage, with extra power comes extra what?
Corruption.
Thank you very much.
So let's talk about that. There's been a lot of corruption in the city. I mean,
yes,
the current mayor, the last mayor. And let's also point out that many mayors have not been from New Orleans.
Yes.
They're kind of transplants. You've already gone into that you're not a transplant. You're a native New Orleanian.
Yeah, imagine that.
I know, right? Exactly. And not there's anything wrong with people. I mean, we love people who come to New Orleans.
Sure.
That's people, come here all the time. Of course, they love the city, which I'm going to talk about tourism here in a second. But the reality is, you being from New Orleans, many people who've been corrupt have not been from New Orleans. How are you going to work on the corruption that has been so prevalent in the city for so long? Because you have a big job. You'll be working with everybody. You've talked about that. What about the corruption?
Well, the first thing that I would do as mayor is bring together two separate sets of groups. I want to bring the neighborhood associations together and have all of them, to the extent that they're willing to do so, have at least quarterly meetings or even bi-monthly meetings, so that all of these individual neighborhood associations can tell the city government, i.e. the mayor and the city council, exactly what's going on in their neighborhoods, because they're the ones closest to the ground. Those are the ground troops. They will tell us what's happening. They will tell us what the real problems are, whether those problems are infrastructure or crime or potholes. That will bring a sense of collaboration. The other thing that I would do, I would mandate that each of the major department heads meet with me monthly. I want to know what their plans are. I want to know how well they've carried out what they're currently doing, what their future plans look like. I want timelines. I want schedules. I want key performance indicators. I want to know what's going on, because the mayor is the chief executive of the city of New Orleans. He's in effect much like the president of the United States, but on a much smaller scope. It simply has to be done that way, and it has not been done that way for decades.
Interesting. People, I love the direction you're going with that. But tourism, I'm going to let you talk about that in a second. I'm going to flip this, because tourism's an easy one.
Yes.
I mean, New Orleans is natural. I mean, people want to come to New Orleans, so they love tourism, right? They love this area. They love New Orleans. It's a culture.
It's the most magnificent city in the world.
Exactly. It's beautiful.
You couldn't replicate this. It's impossible to replicate it.
I'll let you talk about tourism for a second before we go on. I think which is a much bigger issue. Is there anything, number one, that you're going to do for tourism? What can you do to make it better? What do you think you're going to be able to do to help tourism in the city be better than what it already is?
Well,
it is down, by the way, but
yes,
it is down significantly.
Well, first of all, to the extent that we can, we need to begin to reduce the crime rate so that people have the perception that the city is safer. You also need a better infrastructure. You need, when individuals are driving their cars into Orleans Parish, that they're not going to lose their axle in a pothole,
or lose their car with a car check.
But overall, tourism is one of the mainstays of our city finances, of our economic base, and that has developed so much in the last several decades that it's becoming almost the be-all and end-all. That needs to change. We need to expand the economic base so that tourism stays where it is and expands, but also we have manufacturing facilities in the vast 180 square miles in Orleans Parish. The parish of Richland Parish, south of Monroe in North Louisiana, they are breaking ground right now for Facebook or Meta, their data center. It's going to cost $10 billion. They're going to have 5,000 people working on this. Why can't something similar, perhaps albeit small, be developed somewhere in Orleans Parish?
We're going to talk about that in a second, by the way. Tourism. Back there, yes. I want to put a bow on tourism. Yes. So we're going to put that off. That's the easy one.
We've got 19 million people that came to New Orleans in 2023 and also in 2024. They spent $9.6 billion in this city. Not in Chalmette, not in Mandeville, not in Kenner. They spent it in New Orleans. It is a sales tax generator, okay? If we've got 19 million people coming, why can't the city create an app, a travel app, which I have already named the Fleur de Lis NOLA app? It goes on their phone. If 1 in 10 of those 19 million tourists purchase this app for an amount which is the equivalent of what you can purchase this same app in Paris, France, it will generate $190 million each year to this city. It'll wipe out the deficit by a factor of 2. Nobody else has talked about this.
Wait, New Orleans has a deficit?
Oh, yes, it's running a $100 million deficit expected for 2026.
That they voted on, that the current city council and the current mayor voted on.
Exactly.
So we go all kinds of directions right from here, but I'm going to reel us in a little bit more. So tourism, I know, is an easy one, but I love that app idea because businesses could probably buy ads on this. We're giving away an idea, basically, and then it could be more of a money generator for New Orleans. However, New Orleans can't do what's always done, which is rely on tourism.
Exactly.
You know, when all the oil companies left New Orleans in
Yes.
the 80s,
Yes.
when we've watched business and industry shrink
Sure.
up and just go away, and we can't always rely on oil and gas. I mean, we can't rely on the easy things. Just like we can't rely on tourism, there's all those easy industries. Oh, well, if we get this or we get that, there's got to be some stuff that we can go after. Is there anything else that you think that we could go after that can be thinking out of the box here?
I remember as a child waking up at 5 in the morning, as soon as the Times-Picayune hit my front lawn in Mid-City where I grew up. I could smell the coffee roasting that's coming from the industrial canal.
I love it.
I could hear 5 blocks away the clang, clang, clang of the American Can Company putting out thousands and thousands of cans 24/7. What is it now? It's a combination of market rent apartments, retail, and bakeries and small businesses. It's no longer a factory. And it was a beautiful, magnificent architectural structure too. Now it's a place for people to live and work, but there's no manufacturing taking place. And when you have manufacturing, you are importing goods from other states, you are exporting goods to other states, you are increasing employment. When you increase employment, you increase the ability for families to generate income and have a normal, viable middle-class life when you have manufacturing. Tourism, sadly, has an underbelly of minimum wage workforce, people who are working for tips, all of which are honorable types of work. But to get a manufacturing base is what we need.
Do you want to lift people up? Are you trying to bring an opportunity that lifts people up?
Exactly. For instance, New Orleans East. New Orleans East has the 3 R's. It's got the river, it's got the roads, and it's got the rails. Other cities would die for that because they don't have it.
And you have
It's
neighborhoods.
underutilized. And there's neighborhoods all over. And some of the neighborhoods don't even have any grocery stores. The Ninth Ward is a food desert. I heard that today when they were discussing the aftermath of Katrina. It's amazing that they don't have a viable grocery store other than a Dollar General or a mom and pop, every 15 blocks. So to move the city forward, we've got to do something better than spending less than $2 million on economic development out of a $1.8 billion budget. Out of
1.8 billion, only $2 million is being spent on economic development?
Yes. At one of the forums I went to, one of the other candidate participants said, and that's about 1% of our budget. Again, these people don't do math. They're stuck on stupid. It's 1/10 of 1%. It's worse by a factor of 10. We need to have an Office of
Which is why
Economic...
they keep voting for deficit spending.
Bingo, you got it. The Office of Economic Development is comprised of a single individual and a part-time assistant. You can't get Elon Musk on the phone calling from City Hall.
Let me pause you on that. So a $2 million budget only employs
$1.8 billion budget.
No, the $2 million is
for the
economic development,
right?
But $2 million budget only employs 2 people.
Yes.
So they make $1 million each. I'm just saying.
A lot of it is obviously some is spent on travel, on printing, on logistics, on conferences.
$2 million.
$2 million. Actually, 1.7
2 people to promote economic development in New Orleans.
Yes.
And this is
because
why
they contract out a lot of work.
This is a soundbite right here in itself. This is why all the people in this city who keep electing people who say they care but really don't care. They care about them on election day, but they don't care about them afterwards. This is why the underserved in our community, why the people that have remained at the bottom of the economic structure in New Orleans have to live in poor housing in poor areas that are riddled with crime, are stuck there because previous administrations don't work harder to get the correct amount of economic development in the city. Is that what you're seeing?
It's exactly correct. All you have to do is go across the parish line into Metairie, where you've got JEDCO, the Jefferson Economic Development Company, run by Jefferson Parish. They have found multiple new businesses. They've attracted new businesses. They've generated from the ground up technology companies and other companies which are generating living wages for people, the ability to advance forward, which of course generates sales taxes. People will then have a decent wage. They'll buy a home in Jefferson Parish. Jefferson Parish generates real estate taxes. That's what funds them. They're not running at a deficit, to my knowledge. We're running $100 million because we're stuck on stupid.
So we've mentioned other parishes. You've got Jefferson Parish, you've got Orleans Parish. Well, I mean, you're in Orleans, but
St. Bernard,
St. Bernard, Plaquemines. So how are you going to work with other parishes to be able? Do you have a plan, an economic plan, if you will, to work with the other parishes? So now we're broadening out your horizon a little bit.
Whatever affects New Orleans affects the metro area. Just because there's a canal that separates Metairie from New Orleans, or there's a divider on St. Claude Avenue that divides Araby from New Orleans, everything that happens in New Orleans spills over into the other parishes.
No pun intended on the next question, but go ahead.
Sure. Spills over. I'm not referring to the broken canals.
That's what I'm
broken levees.
I'm referring to in a second. Yeah.
Geographic parameters don't determine economic involvement and economic improvement.
What's interesting is as we celebrate as they celebrate, we're commemorating, right, the anniversary of Katrina. That's not why we're doing the interview today, but and we talk about failed government, failed policies. Of course, it was the Army Corps of Engineers that built the levees. However, it was under supervision of people in Orleans Parish.
Yes.
That's a long story made very, 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 very short. Trust me. But it goes back to failed policies. Where does the money go? I mean, you look at the levees that broke, the one that divides Jefferson Parish from Orleans, basically, and the levee broke on the New Orleans side.
Yes.
It did not break on the Jefferson Parish side. And when they looked at it, they cut corners on the Orleans Parish side, which is why the levee broke on the Orleans Parish side and not on the Jefferson Parish side where it was done correctly.
It was snapped. It snapped.
Exactly. And so people are remembering today because of Katrina, when the reality is it wasn't Katrina that caused us all the flooding. It was failed leadership, elected officials that didn't do the right thing. It was because had everything worked out properly and the levee's been done properly, we wouldn't have broken levees. I'm overgeneralizing slightly on this, but to that point, you're really going into a big mess here, into not only a city that's under a lot of duress, but let's talk about city streets. Let's talk about the canal systems in New Orleans. Our sewage and water board, our infrastructure. What will you do to prevent future disasters, whether it's levee or flooding, or whether it's streets, those potholes, or people getting $5,000 water bills?
First of all, with regard to the 17th Street Canal that divides Jefferson Parish from Orleans, our home was 2 blocks from that canal, and we got 10 feet of water on our street. So I'm pretty familiar with that. With regard to potholes, both before and after Katrina, personally, every summer I would get between 400 and 800 pounds of Quikrete from Lowe's, and I would fix the potholes so that our street was at least smooth and silky to drive on. And I've got photos to prove that. That was my civic involvement, because I'd called the streets department over time, and it was just a dead end. There was no response. So sometimes you have to do things on your own. And with regard to sewage and water board and those that assist in the maintenance of the levees, sometimes you simply got to crack skulls. You've got to make people understand that this is a life and death situation for people, and we've got to maintain the levees. Thankfully, we had enough federal funds to do it post-Katrina. And as the only Republican in this race, I am much better suited, much better situated to gain funds from the national government, the national treasury in Washington, D.C., and Jeff Landry's treasury in Baton Rouge. I think that they would be much more interested or involved or beneficial enough to say, New Orleans has a Republican mayor. He believes in limited government. He believes in leadership from the ground up, servant leadership. We need to reward that. We need to fix this city because this city is the economic engine of the state.
So let's talk about misappropriation of funds.
Yes.
You're talking about getting funds from the government. You're talking about getting funds from the governor's office. But previous administrations, especially, Mayor Cantrell, her administration, they got money. The problem is the fiefdom, between the fiefdoms and, look, you could look at the and I'm not knocking people for having jobs at all whatsoever here, but you can look at the structure of the employment or the people employed in the city and various things, and you can see a family tree.
Yes.
Oftentimes.
Yes.
And not that there's anything wrong with friends and family working in the same place. However, they misappropriated a lot of funds. We've had fiefdoms, previous mayors making the wrong decisions, doing bad things, nefarious purposes, and they've had enough friends and family in the right places to help cover it up.
Yeah.
We've watched it at Sewage and Water Board, watching various places. Yeah. You've got another bridge to cross here, another hurdle to jump. How are you going to be able to help prevent the misappropriation of funds when you're mayor?
Interestingly, to my knowledge, there has been no independent verification via audit that CPAs do, those that do audits, and to verify that.
Aren't you a CPA?
I certainly am. Yes, yes. I'm the math guy for the city.
Right.
I'm the one who will examine the city budget in great detail, and I will as mayor, I will certainly not approve a deficit budget.
And after this answer, by the way, we're going to start talking about these hidden funds.
Yeah.
So
yes, the very fact
misappropriation of funds.
Yes, the very fact that there are no internal audits going on in the Department of Finance, which frankly should be collecting substantial parts of sales taxes that it doesn't. If I gave you the figure, you would be floored. But that's a story for another day. The finance department and the law department need to get together. They need to get some independent CPAs in there to review where the expenditures are going. And they've got to verify them, they've got to classify them, they've got to make a determination whether those are valid expenses or not.
So you're telling me that there's no audit, there's no accountability, they keep spending, they keep doing deficit spending and voting on future deficit spending. They've been getting federal money. Nobody can account for it. Nobody gets audited. The money goes away. Potholes don't get fixed. Roads don't get fixed. Levies get done improperly. And the people are still living in squalor and still voting for the same people that put them there.
Yes. Because the media, whether it's the television stations, radio stations, or the newspaper, they all have their favorites. And they have decided that this mayoral race, much like the last one and the one before that and the one before that, are popularity contests, personality contests, who knows whose daddy was mayor before, and who can promise the most and unfortunately deliver the least.
So let's talk about these funds. You have one fund we're going to talk about. I've talked to you about the McDonough Fund.
Yes.
And I'm finding out there's a lot of funds that no one ever talks about.
Multiple funds.
We're talking millions and millions, and if not billions of dollars that we never hear being used. Please,
well,
tell me about the number one on your mind.
Well, not billions of dollars, but certainly millions. The only billion-dollar thing we have in this city is the $1 billion of bonded indebtedness that the city has, for which it is paying upwards of 6.1% interest. It's unusual for a municipality to pay 6.1% interest on 20 to 25-year bonds. It's almost unheard of. But again, that's what we have.
Somebody got to get rich.
Inside the financial statements of the city of New Orleans, and I will remind you that the latest ones that have been issued and produced on the city's website are the ones for 2023. We don't have any idea of what's happened in 2024, and likely won't for another couple of months, because the CPA firm that is doing the audit of the city's financial statements came to a committee of the city council, I think it was like July 10th, and she indicated that she had received a 90-day extension from Mike Wagaspak, who is the legislative auditor. They could have another 90 days to finish up the audit, and they wouldn't run afoul of any of the state rules on city audits. And she indicated that it would likely be ready near the end of August. Well, I haven't seen it yet, and as of today, it's not on the city's website. Now, on the city's website, if you look really carefully, you can find a copy of the 2023 financial statements. Those financial statements are about 220 pages long. It's almost as long as the Home Rule Charter, the city charter, which I have read a substantial portion of. And frankly, it reads like a document that is akin to the Constitution. It was written in the 1950s, and the verbiage that's there, the individuals who helped create it and shepherded it, legal minds back then. And it speaks about the role of the city. It speaks about the role of the individual resident of the city. But back to the financial.
And how New Orleans is actually separate apart from the Louisiana Constitution.
In effect, yes. Yeah. But the Louisiana Constitution always trumps the Home Rule Charter. No pun intended on a great president. Now, back to the city's financial statements. Stuck way inside the notes to the financial statement, there are references to the Wisner Trust. And in the last several months,
one of those funds, by the way.
It's a biggie. It's a biggie. back in 1914, Edward Wisner, who was a transplant from the state of Michigan, came down in the 1800s to Louisiana and became involved in sugar planting, timber harvesting, cattle, and agriculture. And over time, he purchased 50,000 acres of land, both solid land, marshland, and timberland in the southern portions of Jefferson Parish, St. John the Baptist Parish, and Lafourche Parish. Because of...
So not even in New Orleans?
Not even in New Orleans.
Okay.
Not even in New Orleans. South and west of New Orleans. As a result of some coastal erosion and some alluvial changes, that 50,000 acres has dwindled to something between 33,000 and 38,000 acres. I'll stick with the 33,000. The Wisner Trust was created by Edward Wisner in his will. He created a testamentary trust, and he said, after I die, for a period of 100 years, I want the following individuals to have the income from everything that takes place in this trust, whether it was investment income, timber harvesting, oil and gas revenue, cattle production, or alligator hides and nutria pelts. That's what's in there, because a substantial portion of it is marshland, and that's what you get. You get alligators and nutria. Yeah. So in his will, he said, I want my family to have a 40% interest. I want Tulane University to have a 12% interest. I want LSU to have a 12% interest. I want the Salvation Army to have a 1.2% interest, exactly a tenth of the other two. I don't know why. And the city of New Orleans will be an income beneficiary of 34.8%. Call it 35%. So in recent years, when the trust was spinning out $8, $9, $10 million a year, city of New Orleans was getting anywhere from $2.5 to $3.5 million a year. The trust was supposed to end in 2014, at the end of the 100-year cycle. Mayor Mitch Landrieu was the mayor at the time, and either wasn't paying attention to it, or the law department didn't catch it, but the trust was supposed to end. Instead, he left and as mayor, he is a trustee of the trust. He allowed the distributions to continue to the city at the rate of 35%, instead of saying the trust has terminated. Not only is the trust terminated, but we now own in fee simple interest as the city of New Orleans the entire 33,000 acres and all the income it will ever produce. So now that's tied up in court. Meanwhile, post Mayor Mitch Landrieu comes the current mayor, who continued the collection of only 35% to the state, to the city, and let the other 65% go to the other income beneficiaries, who should have been stopped from collecting that because the trust technically ended.
So basically, we're going to get our taste, but we'll make sure you still get your taste.
And of course, if you're a 40% beneficiary, the entire Wisner family, they're collecting $4 million a year. Now, the question is, since 2014, when it should have terminated, how much have they and Tulane and LSU collected that they logically should not have collected, because it was terminated?
Here's a question, just out of curiosity. Had they stopped it, what happens to the money? Who gets the money? The trust is still there. It's still generating money. Where does it go after 100 years? Or where was it supposed to go after 100 years?
At the end of the 100-year term, the corpus, the assets, would belong to the city of New Orleans in fee simple interest, which means that the city could sell that interest, sell some of those lands. It could hire a drilling contractor to drill oil and gas wells on those areas that are under lease. And interestingly, because of the ownership of the land in southern Jefferson Parish and southern Lafourche Parish, it is in effect the landlord of a substantial port of Port Fourchon, which is the hub of most of the oil and gas activity that comes through and to the Gulf of Mexico, i.e. the Gulf of America. So that is an amazing asset. Now the question is, how much is this worth? Estimates have been indicated that it's worth somewhere between $77 and $110 million. Well, if the city were to sell that, the city could do many things.
So the city has the right to sell it.
Yes, but it's unfortunately caught up in two legal battles.
But they just want it, they really just want it in perpetuity. But the Wisner family, you would think that maybe they might say, hey, if you dissolve this, we get a big chunk of money.
No. When the trust dissolves, they get zero because they were income beneficiaries only. When you have a trust, when someone sets up a trust, usually you have someone.
So New Orleans would have gotten the benefit of the trust, of the dissolution of the trust.
Of the 100% of the assets in the trust.
So I'd be curious why they didn't just go ahead and dissolve it, tell the family goodbye, see you later.
Well, because
it sounds to me like
that happened in 2014.
So let's wrap up the Wisner Trust because we got another one that we want to talk about real quick.
Let me wrap up the Wisner really quickly. The interesting thing is that the city council filed suit a couple of years ago against the Wisner Trust in order to dissolve it. And the mayor filed suit again, countersued to tell the city council, no, we want the Wisner heirs and everybody else to continue to get 65% of the income. This is insane. You've got the chief executive officer of the city who could have the city own 100% of 33,000 acres of income producing land and minerals to get only 35%. It's insane.
This is, like I said, it just goes along with all the other insane things that we've been hearing on the other examples with deficit spending and everything. So this is interesting. I want to hear more about this at another time.
Yes.
Because it sounds to me like New Orleans gets it, however, somewhere along the line, somebody's benefiting from keeping it as a money-making trust and not using it as a one-time, hey, we're going to get all this money out, dissolve it.
And sadly, Mayor Cantrell was taking the income distributions that the trust was sending each year, $2-3 million. And instead of dropping those funds into the general fund to pay city expenses, she was shuffling those off to nonprofit agencies of her choosing because she is the trustee of the trust and had the presumed legal right to do that.
And we all know that the nonprofits that are a way of backdooring a lot of money.
That is correct.
So hopefully that's investigated.
Now, interestingly, with regard to the Wisner Trust, what I would like to see happen is that the ownership of those assets goes into a type of public entity where individual citizens like you or I can buy an interest in that trust. It'll do two things. If, for instance, you put up a modest amount of money to buy X% interest in the trust, you would likely get an 8, 9, 10% rate of return from all of this income that's being produced on 33,000 acres of land. You could achieve a nice rate of return for maybe 20, 25, 30 years.
Frank,
but the city will get $100 million up front. What can it do with that?
No, this is a great idea for another time, but think about this idea for the people of New Orleans. The state of Alaska.
Yes.
Everybody gets a check for the oil revenues on the land in the state of Alaska. Imagine if New Orleans had a fund, i.e. the Wisner Fund, where the citizens can participate in the fund in some way. I know you kind of laid some groundwork there, and we're not going to solve that right now. But imagine, if you will, the citizens were able to partake in some of that money, and then every citizen was getting a check or had a way to give back and say, hey, look, I want to be able to make more with my money. Maybe there was some sort of a mortgage fund through that helps people get housing in New Orleans, get some sort of financial assistance off of the generosity of a fund that now belongs to the city.
Exactly.
All right.
And it would be no different than a publicly traded oil and gas royalty trust, which are prevalent all across the United States.
Now you think like a businessman, Frank, which is something that hasn't been done in New Orleans. Okay, there's another fund that
Why
you
I'm in this race.
Yeah, so I'm glad to hear all this. This is great. There's another fund that you've been teasing me about, and you haven't even told me about yet. Oh, you've told me the name of it, but you haven't told me what it does.
New Orleans has had very interesting benefactors, one of which was Edward Wisden, and we talked about him just now with the Wisden Trust. But one was Isaac Delgado. Isaac Delgado was a Sephardic Jew who came to the United States through Jamaica and the Dominican Republic, landed in the United States in the mid-1800s. He was an agriculturalist. He was a cotton broker. He was a sugar broker. And over time, he became involved with his brother, who had interests in sugarcane plantations, primarily west of New Orleans. And there was a family that owned a plantation known as the Albania Plantation, which is situated on the outskirts of the town of Jeanerette, Louisiana, in St. Mary Parish. Town of Jeanerette is a beautiful town. It is pastoral.
It's amazing that all these benefactors, all these wealthy people did all of this outside of New Orleans, but gave money to the city. I'll let you continue.
Because they fell in love with the city of New Orleans.
I'll let you continue.
So the Albania Plantation was deeded by Isaac Delgado after he died. Actually, he and his brother foreclosed on the plantation because they couldn't pay the rent and they couldn't pay the mortgage on the property. So Isaac Delgado dies. He wills it to the city of New Orleans.
The Albania Plantation.
The Albania Plantation. What is the Albania Plantation? And where did I find this? I found it inside a 240-page 2023 financial statement of the city. I said, oh, that's interesting. Let me see if it's in 2022 and 2021. And sure enough, it was there.
Because you did something the city's not doing, audits.
Well, at least a cursory review
of the
relatively small type, small font type on page 242 of the financial statements. So when I'm looking at it, I said, Delgado, Albania Plantation, what on earth is that? So I researched it some more. The city owns outright a 6,500-acre sugarcane plantation outside the town of Jeanerette in St. Mary Parish. Do you know how much 6,500 acres of sugarcane land is worth?
No.
Pick a number. A couple million, million and a half? No. It's worth approximately $20 million. The city has collected between 2021 through 2023 an average of $200,000 a year from this. That's right at a 1% rate of return on magnificent agricultural land. And the most sad part about this is that this was a slave plantation. The city of New Orleans, which tells the world that it's so diverse and it's so honest in its dealings with the races, still has 100% ownership in a slave plantation. The same city government that took down monuments to others during the Landry administration retains ownership of a slave plantation.
I'm going to pause you for a second on this, because ironically, Mitch Landry was the one who took down all the Civil War statues.
Correct.
All the Confederate statues, as they called them, and he took them down in the name of, or whatever, we know he took them down. But at the same time he was doing that, he named a greenway that goes from City Park to the French Quarter,
the Lafitte
Greenway. He named it the Lafitte Greenway in honor of Jean Lafitte, and Lafitte was the largest slave trader in New Orleans. and also one of the largest slave traders in America.
Amazing, isn't it?
And so that it just gets me the ironies here, which the people don't see sometimes. Not only does that irony, exist, and Mitchell Andrew names it Lafitte Greenway, but the city is still angry, or some older generations are still angry about Claiborne dividing the city in half.
Yes.
But nobody talks about how, while Mayor Andrew was using that narrative, he built the airport in Kenner, and the main way to the airport divides Kenner in half, and it divides this area of Kenner in half so much that there are poor black kids who can't get to recreation centers because they were split up the exact same way
as the Claiborne overpass.
But I digress. I'm sorry. Go ahead. So the Albania plantation, they're still getting money off of it,
and very, very little compared to its value.
But they can sell it and use that money to pay down debt.
It needs to be sold. The city of New Orleans should not be the sole owner of a former slave plantation, because some of the very same people that I address in different forums across the city, those which I might luckily be invited to, because the media likes to indicate that only 3 people are running for mayor, not 11. But I digress. Some of those same individuals sitting in those audiences, in those congregations, if you will, might very well be descendants of the same slaves who were on that plantation, who were whipped, beaten, and subjected to inhuman conditions. And this is the same property that the city of New Orleans continues to own, and the city government knows its history.
That's unbelievable. All right. Are there any other hidden secrets? We talked about the New Orleans Charter a little bit. Nobody really realizes that New Orleans has its own charter separate from the state of Louisiana, and it can operate a little bit autonomously.
That's why it's called a home rule charter.
Exactly.
Rule its own home.
Which, because it becomes its own fiefdom. And within the New Orleans government, we've discussed all the other little independent little fiefdoms, and then how all those little fiefdoms get away with things because there's no audits. They hire friends and family, and everybody covers up for the other. And in the meantime, in this process, the people that are electing these politicians are they're the biggest losers. They are on the biggest losing end of the stick that there is. You're going to connect it. Before we start wrapping up here, are there any other funds that you're aware of? Any other things that people would want to know about?
Very, very minor ones, really nothing to spend any time on, except perhaps one. The city has a small cemetery fund that was the result of an elderly lady's will back in the 1920s. I forget the actual name of it. And the city uses the proceeds from the cemetery fund to assist in maintenance of cemeteries. The city owns like 6 or 7 cemeteries, the worst of which is in Mid-City, behind Delgado Community College. It's called the Holt Cemetery, Holt. Holt Cemetery is one of the most decrepit, mismanaged, overgrown, tombstone-toppled cemeteries you'll ever lay your eyes on. I jumped on the fence of the Holt Cemetery, which is a 4-foot-tall concrete fence and a 4-foot wrought iron fence, and I looked inside of it. And what triggered my mind was that somewhere in that cemetery are the remains of Buddy Bolden, who was one of the original creators of jazz. He was a cornetist in the 1910s and 1920s. His body was removed from one tomb to another tomb. Nobody knows what this jazz great is. And I've featured that on my Facebook page because it is an absolute disgrace that the city can't maintain a simple cemetery that's not that big and was basically a potter's field. And it needs to be upgraded. It needs to be simply cared for. I can't imagine that the people that work in the Department of Public Works that go to cemeteries and do routine maintenance don't even know that it's in such horrible shape. Do they simply ignore it? I mean, that's the mindset of some of the people who work for the city of New Orleans. They don't care about the city. I care about this city because I was born here and I'm raised here and I'm still here. And damn it, nobody's going to take my city away from me.
I absolutely love the passion in your voice. I got to tell you, I don't know if I like the passion more than the knowledge and the inner workings of the money matters that you have about this city. And I'm actually quite impressed, I think, with your passion. Most of all, I think if I have to think about it, because it's passion, in my opinion, that solves problems. Because when you have passion for
That's right.
something, you have that drive to go out there and get it. As we wrap up here, Frank, is there anything that you want other people to know besides your passion for the city, your love of the city? Is there any final parting words?
I want people to know that they've got to get out and vote. In the last mayoral election, less than 29% of the registered voters cast a vote for mayor, less than 3 out of 10 people. The city needs to educate its children on the history of the city. It needs to educate its children on the geography of the city. Some items in my platform talk about some of the items that I would like to do, which would be beneficial to both the education of the city and economic development. But I will tell you one thing, and I'll be very brief with this. When I was growing up in Mid-City, the voting poll was next door. I was maybe 5 years old. And luckily, I learned how to read at the age of 4. My father would bring me to the voting poll, hoist me on his shoulder, and tell me, this is the voting poll, and this is who I want to vote for. I want you to press the lever. So I would press the lever, and probably it was for Senator Russell Long or for Earl Long or Gillis Long or any of the many Longs who ran for state offices. But what that gave me, plus the desire that I had to read the newspaper every day while I could smell the coffee roasting on the Industrial Canal and the American Can Company making clang clang cans all day long, it taught me about the history of the city and those who were involved in it. The former mayors that go back, to the early 50s, Chet Morrison and Vic Skiro. And that's what has me so interested in the city, because I've got this institutional knowledge of what took place in the past and what can take place. So that's why I'm running for mayor of the city of New Orleans. My name is Frank Robert Janusa, and I use both my first and my middle name to honor both of my grandfathers, who were classics, men of epic stature in my mind, who built this city and the surrounding areas. I'm number 22 on the ballot. I need your vote. I want your vote. And trust me, when I become mayor, you won't be disappointed, because I'll never be indicted, and I'll give you a fair shot, and we'll bring bottoms-up leadership and servant leadership to this town, and we're going to save this town and make it the Queen City of the South once again.
Frank,
thank you, Mr. Wallis.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I got to tell you, you got some amazing information, and I'd like to ask everybody in the audience, please, to not only share the podcast and share the interview, but Frank brought up something that when you watch my show, you hear me talk about regularly, and that's involvement. And a lot of people like to complain about our country and our city and our government and everything, but it really is on us. Because when you look at past elections and voter turnout at best on a governor statewide election is 50%. On a local election, 10, 20, 30% maybe. We're the ones that are responsible for the bad government that we get, because we're not encouraging our friends and family to go out and vote. And when we do, we change things. It's the one thing that we as individuals can do to truly change things, because when elected officials realize that only 10% or 20% or 30% of the electorate's voting, they realize that they can get away with anything, which is obviously what's happening in New Orleans. And might I make one last point out, which is when you talk about the cemeteries, if the city who benefits from the revenue of the cemeteries can't even take care of the dead people in the cemeteries, they surely are giving you every reason to believe they're not taking care of the living, which is why it's up to you and all of us to get out and vote. Share this interview with somebody that you think should be involved more. And please, thank you so much for your time, and I will see you on the next interview.